Hey guys, so we just had the 250th YCS over the past weekend, really big events for all three regions, LA, London, and Bogota, and so as usual, I thought I'd do a breakdown of the most played hand traps and staples among the topping lists that were at least publicly available, and for this video I actually will only focus on YCS London and LA, because sadly I could not find too much information from the Bogota YCS. Anyways, before we continue, a big thanks to my sponsors, as usual, links and discount codes in the description below. So this is the top 64 breakdown for London that I got from the Carlantra store. Definitely a great resource that you should follow on Facebook and Instagram, by the way, for meta content, as well as also for Ready for Duel. They both make really good resources for meta breakdowns as well as deck lists. And so you see a lot of Kashtira as well as Runick, Naturia, and Spright being sort of like the top three decks of the current format now, with that decline in play of Branded and Labrynth. And at LA, you saw something similar, just a lot of Kashtira and also just Spright and Naturia being like the second and third best decks. And for this video, I was able to find 56 topping deck lists out of the top 128 among the two YCS events. So of course, missing a lot, but not everyone posts their deck list publicly. And so I'll also link down below which resources I used to find these deck lists, but the breakdown will be based on those 56 lists instead. So in terms of the hand trap overview among these 56 topping lists that I found, in terms of the range of hand traps in the main deck, 0 to 15 with a median of 6, this is actually just around the same as the last time I did this, which was YCS Peru, not that long ago really. And if you're also interested in a historical trend of, the hand traps being played, you can certainly check out one of my recent videos. I do a breakdown of, some of the most played hand traps and how they were played over the history in the past year. In the side, median of about 4, a little bit decline compared to the last format, or rather last YCS in Peru, which was around 5, which was higher than usual, to be honest with you. Usually it's around 3, so we're still in the, normal range per se from the past year or so of data. In terms of board breakers, a median of 3 in the main, so this is still about the same as the previous YCS, so nothing too different there. But in terms of the side deck, it looks like they opted to play more board breakers this time around, and you kind of see this with YCS events as I've been breaking these down for the last couple of years or so, is you see events with a lot of hand traps, let's say in the main or the side, and then it sort of flips back down to more board breakers instead for the next YCS as they try to adapt and play around it, and then the next YCS you might see a lot of hand traps again. So those are some of the historical trends that I've noticed personally. And so if we were to go with cover the most played hand traps and these topping lists, at least among the 56 that I found, of course number 1 is still Ash Blossom. Even though the play of Branded has declined, where Ash is very good, and Ash is also good against something like Labrynth, for example, which has also seen a decline in play, it's really the most generic one of them all, and it's still pretty strong, with Spright also being one of the better decks now back again. Ash and other Imperm, something like that on Gigantic is always kind of nice. Next, speaking of Imperm, it's also kind of interesting because originally I thought the play of this card might go down because of, the rise of Labrynth and also Trap Tricks with that post-structure deck release, and infinite Impermanence against those two decks just really not that good at all, right? But at the same time now you saw both of those trap decks seeing a lot of decline in play, and also especially in terms of top cut success, and so you are seeing, I guess, that's probably only part of the reason. Imperm is of course, the most generic of them all. A lot of people are playing something like Talents or maybe even Thrust, and so Imperm being a trap is also very nice and plays around that, and it's also very versatile. And nowadays, a lot of people are main decking cards that are, that you would normally put in for going second, but they're just main decking anyways because they're just such blowout cards, and Imperm is always one of those cards that's versatile and can be good going first or second. The next one is Droll. This was interesting. It's not that it's surprising per se, but it has not been seeing, it wasn't like top 5 hand trap for quite some time now, actually, as I've been covering these for a long time, but it does come back every now and then as being one of the most played hand traps. It really is format dependent, and Droll I think is probably not surprised for a lot of you because Runick, any kind of Runick, more so Runick Naturia, but there's also Runick for hire, and also of course you can't forget Runick Spright. They draw a lot, and Droll, while it's not devastating per se, it still does make an impact. And even something like Branded, a lot of times they can kind of play around it if they already have like Branded Fusion, but if let's say they're playing like the Fright for a build, which admittedly a lot of them are kind of straying away from that, but that really plays into Droll heavily as well. But then again, you do have to, well, also Dark World is another one where I'm not sure sure at the YCS if they saw a lot of Dark World, but even at least at regional level and definitely local level, like you see a lot of Dark World. And if you don't have something like Droll, like it's really not fun to play against, and they just kind of go off and combo off, right? So Droll, certainly a card that I would recommend, at least in the side. And then we have Nibiru, and this card I did predict it would fall a little bit compared to the last time I did this breakdown in YCS Peru. Obviously, it can be good against Kashtira, although a lot of times they're going for that, Rise Hard Set multiple cards pass if they have the hand to do that. But with also Spright coming into the mix, usually you kind of consider a Spright being able to play around Nibiru, but not entirely true either. If you have either Nibiru plus hand trap, then that's just really strong against Spright, or honestly, some of the Spright builds, the way they're playing it out, it actually does play into Nibiru quite a bit, especially basically if you're going to like sprint first instead of the gigantic effect first, then you're going to play into Nibiru, and it can really punish them. So still a pretty good card to have, and it looks like people were main decking more than not. And then we have Ghost Belt. This is also another card that certainly saw a rise in play compared to the last time I covered the YCS Peru. It's really good. Of course, something like Branded, again, I get it. The play of Branded has seemed to calm down a bit, but something like Expulsion, being able to stop that is so critical. And also, not only can you actually play that turn, but it's also, for the Branded player, they did invest quite a lot of resources to set that up, only to get hit by Ghost Spell. Although, of course, they could have something like Mercure to stop it, and also, Ghost Spell against like Brandon Red. If they have Brandon Lost, like you can't really do that. So it's still good. You're seeing a lot of people main decking, or rather playing this in general, mostly side deck, but certainly a card worth considering for a variety of different matchups. Against Labrynth, it can also come up, for example. And so yeah, against Spright, maybe not as amazing as it was before, because you just don't have that elf revival anymore, but you know what, usually this card is still pretty generic enough to warrant playing it. And then we have Gamma. So this one's interesting because usually if Gamma was played, at least in the past year, what I've noticed was that primarily it was always just played as a side deck card, but now you see a lot of in the main, and part of that reason though is in a way a little misleading, and it's because of Spright, because they can play E-Tally, and they use this not only as a hand trap in the main deck, but just also as a body to summon to turbo out Spright plays. So that's part of the reason why you're seeing that kind of trend. But at the same time, non-Spright decks were also, some of them were main decking this card too. It's really, really strong, particularly right now, and it's one of the hand traps that's actually one of the more traditional hand traps that's actually seen consistent level of play, even during that tier format, because tier elements, for example, they were citing this to combat against D-Shifter, and so it's a really strong card. Obviously, you don't want to drive driver rather, but you know what? I think it's certainly worth playing it. Speaking of Shifter, we do have that here. Still seeing a decent amount of play. Of course, really completely sees zero main deck play at this point now, which is sort of interesting because we're seeing a lot of that last format because of tier limits, and all the playable rogue decks were basically decks that could play Shifter. And so now we have, the best deck in Kashtira being Banish Focus, so Shifter is not really as good, but of course, this can be very detrimental against some of the more rising popular strategies, such as something like Mathmech or Rikka, for example. And against Runick, it can be good as well. And so, you know what, it's certainly, if you can play it, probably worth in the side as well. And then we have Effect Failure, and at this point, the proportion of lists that were playing certain hand traps really has plummeted down. Effect Failure, of course, pretty good, just generic, it's a monster. It's also a light monster, maybe it can come up in something like Branded if you need that another light target for Brand Diffusion, but for the most part, probably Nibiru does a better job anyways. And then we just have the two Bestials, and this isn't really because I believe there was a Dragon Lake list that I included here, but at the same time, there were like Spright lists that were actually citing this, for example. I mean, my guess is, maybe for something like Branded, where the Gimmick Puppet Nightmare, you can banish it off, or just Branded, just their regular plays in general, like that could come up to try to stop them. Against something like anything that summons out Ibli might not be as amazing. I guess, for example, if it's a Spright player bringing out Ibli, they probably have already used Gigantic and locked you out into summoning other than 2, so Bestials are kind of dead. But at the same time, it can still be pretty strong and has some utility in this format, even now, post-tier limits. And then in terms of more side deck staples, we are starting with Feather Duster. Of course, no drawbacks to playing this card, while the play of Labrynth has gone down quite a bit, as you notice. Same with Trap Tricks. But at the same time, against like Kashtira, for example, Feather Duster is still really critical and important because, you know, they, as I mentioned before, they might be doing a Rise Hard Set Multiple Pass, or even something like Rebirth. Just getting rid of that is also pretty impactful because that card is insane, has 3 really amazing effects, and you're just going to lose a lot of your grave if you keep it on the field. And then this one's interesting, Dark Ruler No More. And I say interesting because last time I did this breakdown in Peru, Dark Ruler saw very little play. And of course, then, you know, people realize, hey, Sprite's actually still really good. And now you're seeing all of a sudden a very big uptick in Dark Ruler, which of course you saw a lot during that Sprite format ever since they came in. During Part of the Elements, for example, this was like the most played staple, and it was actually main decked a lot of instances. Right now, most people are seeming to side deck this rather than main, but something you do need to consider, especially, you know, now that people understand and realize Spright is definitely one of the top decks now, and you're going to see a lot of it again, and you're probably seeing a lot of Dark Ruler again, so Spright players, you're going to have to prepare for that. And then we have Cosmic Cyclone. This one is also a card that's not surprising to me. I think it's seeing a lot of uptick because of Runick and Hugin. I'm not sure why they put this effect on that card, but it can protect against card destruction, backward destruction, right? So something like Feather Duster just doesn't cut it, and you really need to get that field spell out if you want to play. Otherwise, they're going to generate too many resources, and you're probably not going to play too much. And then we have Evenly Match, which was, of course, one of the most played staples up until the last couple of YCS events now. Are really strong. Still a good amount of people main decking this card, and actually more main deck than side deck, even though, of course, this is a going second card, and most of the decks included in this pretty much were all going first decks. But again, the game has evolved so much now that you can still main deck a very going second focus card like this and still be able to play, and it just it can really reward you if you do lose the die roll and still can clear boards and play and get the win. And then we have Call by the Grave. So interesting that a lot of people are also now starting to side deck this again. We were seeing this kind of decline quite a bit since the tier format. And right now, you know, it's nice that obviously a lot of people are playing hand traps, but also a variety of different hand traps. You also see, let's say, like something like Branded, they're going to have to play this to get rid of that Ash. Against Kashtira, not amazing, because in terms of the fact that, you know, they don't really have many like monster effects that's happening in the grave, like in terms of their main deck monsters, right? It's more so like to get rid of their hand traps. So that's why it's probably not seeing as much play as it used to back in, let's say, for example, during the format like DP, where, you know, a lot of decks were playing DP, so Call by the Grave would hit something like that, and also hand traps. So it was like a double whammy. Right now, more so for hand traps. And then we have talents. We did touch on this a little bit earlier. It's still very strong, and if you saw that YCS live stream with Samir, aside from the current cards that we'll also get to a little bit later, but talents still very strong, can really turn the tide of the game, and, you know, being able to draw whatever or take really strong going first or second. And then we also have Book of Moon. This has now become more popular than Book of Eclipse, it seems. You know, it does target, it can only do one monster, but you know what? That might be all that you need at this point in this format, especially with Kashtira going just a Rise or Pass a lot of the instances. And this can also help protect your own monsters from something like an Imperm or Veiler, for example, and flip your guy face down. And you don't let your opponent draw cards like Book of Eclipse does. So it's nice to have. And then we have D-Barrier, which of course is a very strong card, but at the same time has seen a lot of fall in play the last 2 YCS events in a row now. But yeah, I'm not sure how to feel about this card. I do still think it should probably be banned, but I think I've definitely seen some other people, content creators and YouTubers saying about, you know, how this might not be as good as people think it is. So yeah, you know, I'm indifferent. I'm certainly open to suggestions, but it certainly I don't think anyone can deny that at least, you know, it is a strong card, right? And then speaking of books, we do have Book of Eclipse as well, and so similar to Book of Moon, you know, it's really just good for going second. You can still use it going first as well, not as ideal, because you're gonna make your opponent's probably actually gonna draw off this, whereas if you're going second, you can at least try to clear those monsters that you flip face down so that they don't get to draw. But still, going into this format at the beginning with the new list, you know, this was like one of the more side deck cards, of course, because of that Kashtira, but now their boards are a little different, not necessarily going for that entire zone lock plays anymore, but still a good card nonetheless. And then we also have a Pointer of the Red Lotus. This card also might deserve to just get banned outright. I mean, they put it at 1 when they put Red Reboot to, well, 0. But you know what? It's kind of a sacky card. Don't get me wrong. I play this card too. Like if you're playing Spright, you're probably always citing this, and as well as other cards like Mathmech, for example. They can technically search this too. But you know what? I don't think, you know, if a card like Trap Dust shoots ban, I think this card should probably also go. And you know, paying 2,000 life points, like not that big of a deal, and you get to like snipe something out. Let's say like something like, if it's something like Lava Golem where you otherwise would not have been able to stop, really detrimental. And I think going first is already very strong for most decks nowadays anyway, so probably should take this away from them. And then some other board wipe cards. We do have Lightning Storm, still pretty good. Again, I did mention about Runick and their like protection, so not as amazing against that kind of strategy, and also they might just have Nap Beast entirely. But still, generic board wipes, always nice to have. Definitely more of a side deck card, of course. We have Gamma Seal here. Technically, if I had done all kaijus overall, it would be a lot higher. Of course, this is Gamma Seal specifically. I was seeing other kaijus being played like Kumongas. I was seeing Mathmech players playing Jizukuru, I'm guessing because of like the small world bridges, and also Godarla saw a little bit of play as well, and of course Radiant sees play, and something like Branded because it is dark. And so, you know, kaijus are again still pretty nice to have. You can just get rid of that Arise Heart or other problematic monster that you otherwise can't really out. Something like, you know, Arrival Ignister, you know, not really seeing that much YCS top play, so it's probably fine. But I think the play of kaijus has declined a little bit since the last one, but still very solid. We also have Enemy Controller. This one's really nice to have actually, because you were seeing a little bit more Ibli being played again, whether in Spright or even in Kashtira, and so being able to not only just get rid of that as cost, but also try to take your opponent's monster, really good to have. In Spright, it's also kind of nice in terms of, you know, being able to dodge like an Imperm or Veiler, and then, you know, you still summon out a body like with like Beaver, for example, and also take your opponent's monster. So it's certainly nice, pretty good going first or second. Going first, you know, you're probably only really like, you can switch your battle position, which doesn't really is not that impactful, but being able to take your opponent's monster if you have a body that is expendable can definitely be a big difference maker. And then we have Thrust, not nearly as popular as Talents, I think. I mean, it's obviously really good if you're playing a going second deck, let's say something like Sky Striker, but Thrust still solid. I mean, you can get something like D-Barrier, for example, even if you're going first and you get hand trapped and you just set it, but really strong, can get you whatever board wide clear card that you need, and really punishes players when they hand trap. And lastly, we have Kurikara Dev Incarnate. So this is something that a lot of you will probably recognize from that YCS live stream with Samir taking that win, going second with double Kurikara, because turns out it's not once per turn, and I'm sure a lot of you watching, including myself, did not know that. And so really strong card, really unique too. And so the price of this card has also increased a lot since. Really strong card in terms of clearing boards and also giving yourself a big booty, and on top of that also stealing your opponent's monsters in the end phase. Really interesting to have, and you were seeing a decent amount of players citing this card for this event. Who knows if it will keep up its popularity moving forward. Maybe people play Ibli more again, and then you just cannot Kurikara anymore. I'm not sure how the game will evolve, but that was it for the most played hand traps and staples. So as usual, you know, a big thanks to my Patreons. Really do appreciate the support, and hopefully this video was helpful in helping you prepare your deck list for whatever events that's coming up. For me, I do have Niagara Regionals coming up this weekend, which I should probably be preparing for, but instead I'm spending what free time I have to make this video. So hopefully you found it worthwhile, and well, take care guys.